Hey guys, I'm Brad from Nighthawk Gliders. Today, in this video, we're going to build the Tornado Updraft 12. This is a balsa wood airplane built specifically for the POWERUP 4.0. And we had such a great opportunity to design a kit for the Tornado Updraft and put all the parts necessary in the kit and some additional tools I think that you guys will find useful. So we're going to build one today. Inside the kit, you're going to find the wing, the tail and winglets, a fuselage, some basswood strips for extra strength and durability, a sanding block with 150 grit sanding paper, a tube of Gorilla brand super glue, nail file, some pre-cut strips of masking tape. And also included are going to be a double-sided sheet of instructions. And you will also find full-scale plans. All you have to do is go out and buy some additional materials and you can build as many of these as you like. But in regards to this kit, we have everything we need to build one. Let's get it building. We're going to start off by cutting the wing out of the balsa sheet. There's a few tabs that you do need to cut. And when it comes to the ends, you want to cut those straight across. Do not, however, cut the centerline tabs. You want to keep those intact. All right, so let's cut those out. We're also going to cut out the dihedral gauge, which we'll use later. There we go. We're actually going to save these parts for later. So I'm just going to break this out. I'll break out a couple of these like that. These are going to become tools. On to step 2. In this step, we're going to sand the leading edge of the wing. We want to remove the carbon residue and create a nice smooth surface for our basswood strips. So basically, you just want to sand perpendicular to the leading edge. Doesn't take a whole lot of sanding. Again, the sanding block is perpendicular to the wing. There we go. Now we have a nice clean edge. Moving on to step 3. Here we're going to need the wing, 2 basswood strips, some super glue, wax paper, and a paper towel, just to help prevent glue from getting everywhere. All right, so we're going to need to put wax paper on our surface. It's very important because super glue does not stick to wax paper, and that keeps us from gluing our project to the table. All right. Okay. Now, if you haven't used super glue in a tube before, first time that you put the cap on, it's going to break the seal. And you want to be careful not to squeeze the tube. It's very sensitive when you tighten it down, so you don't want to build any extra pressure, so as soon as you release the cap, it's going to squirt all over the place. Okay, and we're going to apply a very thin layer on the right side of our wing here. Gently squeezing the very bottom of the tube. It comes out fast, so you do have to be careful. And even the heat of your fingers is going to expand the glue, and it's going to want to come out of the bottle. All right, just to make certain that we have it spread, I like to use one of the scrap pieces of balsa to slide it along the edge to kind of spread it along. There we go. And make certain that everything that you have touched with super glue that you put on your wax paper. All right, so this is going to go flat, and we're going to take one of the basswood strips and line it up with the center and push it on. Lift it off the wax paper. All right, so this is where paper towel can come in handy. You can wipe off the excess glue, clean up your surface a little bit. All right, so that's one side done. Just gonna do the other side. Now, if your basswood strip isn't very clean on the ends, you can give it a little sanding. Kind of clean it up a little bit. Might have a rough cut. Then we're going to do the same thing on this side. Don't want to go too crazy with the glue. But you definitely want to make certain that it's coated well. There we go. Put this side on here. All right. Clean up our surface. Okay. Now we can use our knife to cut off the ends. Basswood's kind of tough. Now we have a little bit more of a durable leading edge in case you hit something sharp or something a little bit more solid than the ground. It's going to have a little bit more of a protection. Our next step is to sand an airfoil shape into our wing using our sanding block. If you notice, our sanding block doesn't quite have sanding paper all the way to the end. And that's not because we're being cheap, but it's actually by design. What we're going to do is sand the trailing edge of our wing by keeping the sanding block in contact with the table. Now this generates an angle. The more we sand, the lower this will come in contact with the leading edge, and that will then provide the right angle that we're striving for. Our goal is to probably get about 1/32 of an inch on the trailing edge, and you can use your basswood strip as a gauge by laying this flat. So if it comes close to the same thickness, then you know you're hitting your mark. So let's give that a go. I'm going to start by, this is actually going to be a lot of work here, so I'll probably fast forward the majority of the sanding time. It's okay to take your time. No need to rush this step. You just want to make certain that your sanding is even and balanced on both sides of the wings. You don't want to oversand one side. Keeping this back side here in contact with the table. Now you can check your progress by using that basswood strip. That's pretty close right there. That's a little bit lower. Okay, so it's thinnest right here. This is actually spot on. This is actually spot on. You can go a little bit thinner if you want. You don't necessarily have to. If you notice, they're starting to create a kind of a wedge shape right there. If you feel comfortable with that, you can move on to the leading edge. So I do the same process a little bit, keeping the no sandpaper down on the table here. And I'm gonna sand this basswood strip. Pretty much it's gonna be a harder piece of wood to sand. But I'm just gonna continue to sand and create more of a curvature of an airfoil. Notice I'm not going all the way. And then you can constantly, 1/32 of an inch on the leading edge is probably pretty good as well. There we go. It's looking closer to an airfoil shape. Probably could sand the leading edge just a little bit more. Step number 6, let's take a look. This picture is actually a representation of sort of a common airfoil shape. You can actually design your own airfoil shape if you like, but you really don't have to go too crazy. You can just kind of keep it simple. I'm just going to sand the underside a little bit. Sort of the same process as I did on the leading, but I want to make certain that the trailing edge is flat on the table as I do this. Just do a little bit on the leading edge on the underside. Not too much, just enough to smooth out the basswood and glue. That's about it. Now if you want to kind of round off the leading edge, you can do so. Get the corners rubbed off a little bit. So that's pretty much the gist of it. You can be as particular as you like, but it really doesn't require too much airfoil. The airplane will still fly. On to step number 7. All right, in this step, we're going to work on preparing the wing for dihedral. Dihedral is the angle that we apply to the wings, and this creates some natural stability in the airplane. To do that, we're going to use a nail file to kind of file a groove into the wing, and then we'll be able to snap the wing up for the angle. But before we do that, let's cut the tab. There's only one tab that you need to cut, and that's the last tab here, the trailing edge tab. So we want to separate those two items. There we go. Okay. Now we want to file, and we're going to use sort of the corner edge of the nail file, and you want to set it into the groove and start filing across the whole edge, or the whole center line of the wing. Now I'm going to do that on this side for a little bit, then I'm going to flip it over and do it on the other corner. All right, our goal is to kind of get it thinned, but not all the way through. You want to make certain that there's still material in between. And if you try to lift up on it and it's still very resistant, then you want to file a little bit more. The old school method would be to saw the two wing halves separate, then sand the inner edge in the wing joint, and then create the dihedral. This is a method that I created that I think is definitely an easier technique, and it provides more of a straighter dihedral joint. Okay, I think we are there. So we'll move on to the next step. All right, let's glue the dihedral into the wing. You're going to need the gauge, some super glue, and a scrap piece of balsa. We're going to break this, not really break it, but we're going to snap it upwards. I know, sounds horrible, doesn't it? All right, let's get some super glue in the joint. Now you definitely want to get glue in the joint itself, but be careful. I'm going to show you right here. Do not glue the flaps. You want to leave the flaps flexible like this. So there's that tab that's right there. So we're going to glue from that tab all the way to the leading edge. That's as far as we want to go. You want to get glue in the joint up to that tab. And also, you want to get glue outside the joint, about 1/4 inch on either side. This is going to add some strength to the wing. All right. Clean off that tip and close it back up. All right, the scrap piece of wood is about 1/2 inch wide, and that's about as wide as we want our glue surface to be, our glue coverage. That's it. That's pretty much it. Now the dihedral gauge, you have a wing and a tail, so the wing is the higher one, so we want to use that. We'll lift this up to where it touches the wingtip. Now, if you do not have any glue accelerant, and by accelerant or CA accelerant, I mean some people call it a kicker, this will actually make the super glue set instantly. If you don't have this, then you just want to kind of let the wing set. You might want to set a book on the wing, make certain that the gauge stays put. But if you have accelerant, awesome. I like to put it in a little bottle like this, and you squirt a little bit of accelerant on the super glue, a few drops, and that's going to let it set pretty much instantly. So there we go. We now have a dihedral applied to our wing. In this step, we're going to cut out the tail and the winglets, and then we're going to apply the winglets to the main wing. You may notice that the winglets are a little bit thicker on this side than they are on this side. This is actually the front, the leading edge of the winglet, and this is the trailing edge. Same goes for that one. So let's cut those out. We're just going to use our hobby knife. All right, you're also going to need some super glue and a sanding block. So let's get these winglets on this wing. And again, there's a little bit thicker on one side than the other side. You see that? All right. So I recommend using a sanding block. The instructions don't mention this, but you might want to just give it a little touch up on the wingtip, kind of level that off. Put some super glue on the wingtips. Oops, I have a little too much. We'll use this scrap piece of balsa to spread it out. Again, be sure to put that back on some wax paper so it doesn't fall. Can you see this? I'm just gonna touch the front edge here to the tip and the trailing edge. So it's perpendicular, like that. Do the same for the other side. That is winglets on the wing. Awesome. All right, we're going to focus on the tail now. Similar to what we did with the dihedral on the wing, we're going to do the same for the tail. So you're going to need a nail file, some super glue, the dihedral gauge, and some extra piece of scrap balsa. So on the nail file, I use this edge for the wing, so I'm going to use the clean, crisp nail file for the tail. Same process, just kind of get the groove in there. Do that for a little bit on one side, and then the other. Don't need to do this too much, just enough to create a V groove right there. Do you see that? All right. I have some wax paper down here. Yep, that is just fine. All right, so we're going to apply some super glue. Make certain you really get it in the groove. And on either side of the groove. About 1/4 of an inch. Clean that off. All right. Use our scrap piece of wood to spread that evenly. There we go. And this is actually kind of a little bit of a difficult prop up. So you might need to hold it for a little bit until it starts to get a little bit tacky. But if you have the accelerant, now is the time to apply it. There we go. Let it sit for about a second or two. There we go. Now we have our tail with the appropriate angle. On to the next step. All right, we're moving on to step 11. I actually had failed in my instructions to illustrate cutting out the fuse, the fuselage. No biggie. I think you guys got the idea of what you needed to do. We're going to cut out the fuse, and then we're also going to apply a basswood strip to the tail boom in this step. So let's cut this out. I think I got all the tabs cut. Should come out, no problem. All right, I need some wax paper. You're going to need some super glue and the basswood strip. So we're going to reinforce the tail boom. What's that? All right. Now we have the tail boom with the basswood strip. It's going to strengthen the tail boom a little bit. All right, step number 12, we're going to reinforce the nose just a little bit with some basswood. I'm going to apply that right there. So let's get some super glue on that. Probably should smear that just a little bit. we go. And we'll cut that off. Oh, there we go. All right. On to the next step. All right, step number 13, we're just gonna sand off some roughness there, right there in the joint. Just using our sanding block and just kind of smooth that out a little bit. Step 13 just basically mentions about the wing, but I would recommend doing that as well for the tail. Doesn't take much, just wanna create kind of a good gluing surface. That's pretty much it. Let's go on to step 14. All right, here we're gonna glue the main wing on the fuse. So let's apply some super glue to the fuse where the wing will be mounted. Just this part right here. You can be a little bit generous with the glue in this spot. It's quite all right. Nice bead of glue there. Now we don't want to spread it like we have before in other gluing situations, so we're just gonna line this up the best we can. I'm gonna tack the very front leading edge and then slowly let the wing down and line it up to trailing edge. Just gonna hold it like that for a second or two. Pretty much set fairly quickly. All right. Now, what's very, very, very important is that we need to apply extra glue on what I call the armpits of the airplane. So you want to put some glue on the underside right there in the joint. And again, you want to be very generous with the glue. Stay away from the flaps. And apply glue as well on the fuse. Make certain you spread it a good 1/4 of an inch or more onto the fuse. You can see that right there. And also onto the wing. And do the same for the other side. If there's going to be any breaking, it's probably going to happen in this area. Which if you have a bad wreck and the wing hits the ground at a particular angle, it might actually snap the fuse. So you want to make certain you get a good enough support underside the wing right next to the fuse. So a little extra glue is going to help out. You should have plenty of glue anyway. There we go. Wipe this off. If you have accelerant, use it. Otherwise, you'll have to let it dry for a couple hours, maybe a day. Just right there. Whoops. And that is the wing. All right, let's put on the tail. All right, we're on to step 15, and this is where we're going to apply the tail. Just as simple and straightforward as the wing. Let's just add some glue on the fuse. Again, you can be generous with the glue. Quite all right. we go. The tail needs to be installed nice and level. I normally like to touch the leading edge and then bring down the trailing edge, and then I eyeball it to see if it's nice and level. And it will stick pretty quickly, by the way. No need to add some glue in the armpits of the tail. It should be just fine. All right, this is the next and final step. What you want to do is mount the POWERUP 4.0 on a balsa wood airplane. You'll need to install the clips so that they face upwards as such, and they clip on just like this. If for whatever reason your fit is a little loose, that's why we have given you some pre-cut strips of masking tape, which you can tear off and put onto the fuse. This will give you a little bit more of a friction fit. There we go. And that way the POWERUP does not fall off the plane as it flies. And that's pretty much it. Thank you guys for buying a POWERUP 4.0 and a Tornado Updraft 12. We know you're enjoying flight and enjoying life. Take care, my friends.